Hello and welcome back to Dream Room. If Spurge keeps coming back in your lawn, flower bed, patio, gravel path, or even through the smallest crack in your driveway, the most important thing to know is this. Pulling the weed is not enough. You have to stop the seeds. One mature spurge plant can produce thousands of seeds in a single season. Those seeds can remain hidden in the soil, waiting for warm conditions before they germinate. That is why you may clear an area completely in late summer, only to see dozens of tiny plants return the following spring. And if you have a small backyard, a narrow side garden, a 6 by 8 foot patio, a rented deck, or just a few containers around the front door, this weed can be especially annoying. There is not much space to begin with, so even a small patch can make the whole area look neglected. Maybe you are over 60 and no longer want to spend an afternoon kneeling on concrete pulling weeds one by one. Maybe your hands are not as strong as they used to be. Or perhaps you are simply busy, working from home, caring for family, or trying to enjoy your garden instead of constantly maintaining it. The good news is that you do not need expensive equipment. A pair of gloves, a narrow hand tool, some mulch, better watering habits, and the right prevention strategy can dramatically reduce how much spurge returns. But there is one mistake I want you to avoid from the beginning. Do not simply run a string trimmer over a mature patch and assume the problem is solved. Spurge grows low to the ground, spreads outward in runners, and may already be carrying seeds near the base. Cut it carelessly, and you may turn one small patch into a much larger problem. In this video, I will show you exactly what to do depending on where the spurge is growing, inside flower beds, between pavers, along driveway cracks, in gravel, around containers, and inside your lawn. More importantly, we are going to change the conditions that allow it to return. Because the real goal is not to kill spurge today. It is to make next year easier. If practical, low-cost ideas for creating a cleaner, more comfortable home, patio, and garden are useful to you, subscribe to Dream Room. We share simple solutions designed for real homes, small spaces, modest budgets, and people who want beautiful surroundings without turning maintenance into a full-time job. 1. Why spurge keeps returning even after you pull it. The reason spurge feels almost impossible to eliminate is simple. The plant you see is only the current generation. The real problem is already waiting in the soil. A single mature spurge plant can produce thousands of seeds during one growing season. Those seeds may remain in the ground long after the original plant has disappeared, waiting for warmth, moisture, sunlight, and a small patch of exposed soil. That is why you can pull every visible weed from a flower bed in August and still discover a fresh green carpet the following spring. Think of your garden soil as a storage box. Every time a mature spurge plant is allowed to flower and set seed, more seeds are added to that box. Pulling one plant removes today's problem, but preventing seed production reduces next year's workload. This matters even more in small spaces. If you have a narrow backyard, a patio surrounded by gravel, several raised containers, or a small lawn beside the driveway, there may be only a few places where weeds can establish. Unfortunately, those are often exactly the places spurge likes. Warm edges, thin turf, exposed soil, cracks, and sunny gaps between plants. So instead of waiting for the weeds to become obvious, start a simple 5-minute inspection once a week. Look along the edge of the driveway first. Then check beneath outdoor chairs, around container stands, beside stepping stones, along raised bed borders, and anywhere mulch has become thin. Young spurge is much easier to remove than a mature plant spreading 12 or 18 inches across the ground. If bending is uncomfortable, do not try to inspect the entire property in one afternoon. Divide the space into small zones. Check the patio today, the flower bed tomorrow, and the lawn edge later in the week. Keep a lightweight bucket or reusable garden bag near the door. When you notice a young plant, remove it immediately, rather than telling yourself you will come back later. There is another clue worth watching. Spurge often appears where something else in the landscape is weak. A bare patch beside a stepping stone, compacted soil near the driveway, a thin section of lawn, or an empty gap between ornamental plants can become a perfect nursery for new seedlings. So when you find spurge, do not only ask, "How do I remove this weed?" Ask a second question. Why was this particular spot easy for the weed to occupy? That question will eventually save you far more work than pulling weeds alone. And before we talk about the best removal methods, there is one common reaction that can actually make a spurge problem worse: cutting it down with a mower or string trimmer. G2. The biggest mistake: cutting spurge instead of removing it. One of the most common mistakes homeowners make with spurge is also one of the easiest to avoid. Do not mow or string trim a mature patch before removing it. It feels efficient. You see weeds spreading across the edge of the lawn, grab the trimmer, and in less than a minute everything looks clean again. But the problem is still there. Spurge grows very low to the ground, often spreading outward from one central point. When you cut only the visible stems, the root and growing point may remain behind. The plant can recover, and if it has already started producing seeds, disturbing it carelessly may spread those seeds into nearby bare areas. A small patch beside the driveway can quickly become several patches along the lawn edge, around stepping stones, or underneath patio furniture. So before mowing, take a few minutes to inspect the area. If you see isolated spurge plants, remove them first. Follow the stems back toward the center of the plant, gather the runners together, and pull from the base rather than tearing off individual branches. If the plant is mature and carrying flowers or seed clusters, place it directly into a bucket or garden bag. Do not shake it around the flower bed, and do not toss mature plants onto bare soil where loose seeds may remain. For many older gardeners, the easiest system is what I call the 5-minute patrol. Keep a lightweight bucket and a pair of gloves near the back door. Once or twice a week, walk through the patio, lawn edge, gravel path, and flower beds for just 5 minutes. Remove 5 plants, maybe 10. Then stop. You do not need to spend 2 hours bent over the garden to make progress. Regular small removals are often much more effective because you are catching young plants before they become large enough to produce another generation of seeds. After working in a heavily infested area, clean soil and plant debris from your hand tools, mower wheels, or trimmer guard before moving into a cleaner section of the property. The principle is simple. Remove first, cut later. That one change can help keep a small weed problem from becoming a property-wide outbreak. Now that we know what not to do, let us move into the safest and simplest place to start: removing spurge from flower beds and small garden spaces. Flower beds and small gardens. Pull smarter, not harder. When spurge appears inside a flower bed, raised planter, or small garden, the simplest solution is often still the best one. Pull it by hand, but do it correctly. The first step is gloves. Spurge releases a white, milky sap when the stems are broken. Some people can touch it without a problem, while others may develop skin irritation or a rash. There is no reason to find out the hard way, so treat gloves as standard equipment. Next, do not grab the first stem you see and yank upward. Spurge usually spreads outward in several runners from one central crown. Follow those stems back toward the base of the plant. Gather the runners together, then loosen the soil around the center before pulling. A small hand fork, narrow weeding tool, or even an old screwdriver reserved for garden work can help. The goal is to remove as much of the root as possible. If you only tear off the top growth, you may leave part of the plant behind. That means more work later. Timing also helps. If the soil is dry and hard, lightly water the area first, or wait until after a gentle rain. Slightly moist soil releases roots much more easily than compacted, bone-dry ground. This is especially useful if you are over 60, have limited hand strength, or simply do not want every weed removal job to become a wrestling match. For raised beds, narrow borders, or patio gardens, a long-handled weeding tool can reduce how often you need to bend or kneel. Work slowly. 1 complete plant is better than 5 broken stems. And once a mature spurge plant is out, do not leave it lying beside your flowers. If it has already formed seeds, those seeds may remain in the bed. Place mature plants directly into a bucket or garden waste bag and remove them from the area. In a small decorative garden, this method has another advantage. You can remove the weed without spraying nearby roses, herbs, ornamental grasses, or container plants that you want to keep. That matters when every plant in a small space has a purpose. But flower beds are the easy case. The real frustration begins when spurge appears in places where you cannot reach the root at all, deep inside a driveway crack, between patio pavers, or underneath gravel. That is where the strategy needs to change. 4. Driveways, pavers, and gravel. Treat the crack, then fix the crack. Spurge becomes much more frustrating when it appears in a place where you cannot easily reach the root. Driveway cracks, patio joints, gravel paths, and spaces between pavers are perfect examples. You may pull the top growth and think the weed is gone, but the root can remain protected several inches down inside the crack. A few days or weeks later, fresh growth appears in exactly the same spot. So in hardscape areas, the goal is different. You are not only removing the plant, you are also dealing with the tiny pocket of soil, dust, and debris that allowed the seed to germinate. For a small patch, start with the simplest method. Use a narrow crack weeding tool, old screwdriver, or stiff scraper to loosen the plant and remove as much of the root as possible. For isolated weeds growing on suitable hard surfaces, hot water can also damage the foliage and root tissue. Use it carefully and keep it well away from nearby flowers, lawn edges, and desirable plants. You may also see homemade recipes using vinegar, salt, and dish soap. A common mixture is 1 gallon of vinegar, 1 cup of salt, and 1 tablespoon of dish soap. It may burn down weeds growing in cracks, but there is an important limitation. Do not make this a routine treatment beside flower beds, lawns, shrubs, or container gardens. Salt can accumulate in surrounding soil and damage plant roots, while repeated vinegar use can affect soil conditions. If you use a homemade treatment at all, keep it strictly on isolated hardscape areas where you do not intend to grow plants. A labeled hardscape weed control product can also be an option when used exactly according to its directions. But killing the visible spurge is still only half the job. Once the plant is gone, sweep the crack clean. Remove loose soil, dried leaves, decomposed mulch, and other organic debris. If a paver joint has opened up, refresh the appropriate jointing material. If a driveway crack is widening, repair it when practical. This matters because every little groove filled with dust eventually becomes a miniature flower bed for weeds. The same principle applies to gravel. Leaves break down, soil collects, seeds settle into that material. Before long, weeds have exactly what they need. So remember this rule. Treat the weed, then remove the place where the next weed wants to grow. And that leads directly to the next part, because bare soil and open spaces are often the biggest reason spurge keeps finding its way back. 5. Why bare soil is an invitation. Build a garden spurge hates. Once you remove the visible spurge, the next step is to make the area less welcoming for the seeds that are still waiting. Spurge takes advantage of open, sunny ground. A thin flower bed, an empty gap between shrubs, exposed soil around a patio, or a neglected corner beside a container can become the perfect place for new seedlings to appear. So instead of thinking only about weed removal, start thinking about coverage. In ornamental beds, maintain a proper layer of mulch over exposed soil. Mulch reduces the amount of sunlight reaching the soil surface, helps hold moisture more evenly, and makes it harder for many weed seedlings to establish. You do not need to bury the garden under a mountain of material. Keep the mulch even, and leave a little breathing room around the crowns of flowers and the trunks of shrubs. Piling mulch directly against stems can create a different set of problems. If your flower bed has large empty spaces, consider filling some of them with suitable ground covers or intentional plantings. The goal is not to overcrowd the garden. It is to reduce the wide, bare areas where spurge can germinate without competition. Container gardens need attention too. If you have pots around the front door, on a balcony, or beside a small patio, check underneath them occasionally. Potting mix often spills from drainage holes and collects beneath saucers and plant stands. That small amount of soil is enough for weeds to grow. Sweep it away before it becomes a seed bed. The same thing happens in gravel. At first, a gravel path may look perfectly clean, but over time, leaves, dust, grass clippings, and decomposing organic matter settle between the stones. Eventually, that debris behaves like soil. Spurge seeds land there, receive moisture, and suddenly your decorative gravel starts producing weeds. Regular sweeping and removing accumulated organic material can make a noticeable difference. This is especially useful in small spaces because prevention also improves the appearance of the area. A clean patio edge, evenly mulched flower bed, tidy gravel path, and properly arranged containers make the whole garden feel more intentional. You are solving two problems at once, reducing weeds and improving the design. But if spurge is appearing inside the lawn itself, mulch and sweeping will not solve the problem. There, the weed may be telling you that the grass is weak, and that is what we need to fix next. Sucks, spurge in the lawn. Fix the weak turf before reaching for a bottle. When spurge starts appearing inside the lawn, do not look only at the weed. Look at the grass around it. Spurge often takes advantage of places where turf is already weak. Thin patches, compacted soil, areas scalped by mowing, dry edges beside concrete, or spots where irrigation does not reach evenly. In other words, the weed may be showing you exactly where the lawn needs help. Start with mowing height. Cutting grass too short can expose the soil surface to more sunlight and weaken the turf canopy. Instead, mow at the recommended height for your particular grass species and avoid removing too much leaf tissue at one time. A thicker lawn leaves less open space for weed seedlings. Watering matters too. Frequent shallow watering keeps the upper layer of soil damp, which can create favorable conditions for new weeds. In most established lawns, deeper and less frequent irrigation encourages grass roots to grow farther into the soil. Pay special attention to the edges beside driveways, sidewalks, and patios. These areas often heat up faster, dry out sooner, and become thin before the rest of the lawn. Once bare soil appears, spurge can move in quickly. Repair bare areas at the correct season for your turf type, rather than allowing them to remain open. If spurge is already established throughout the lawn and hand pulling is no longer practical, a selective herbicide may be appropriate. The important word is selective. Choose a product specifically labeled to control spurge and approved for the grass species growing in your yard. Some broadleaf lawn herbicides contain 2,4-D, an active ingredient commonly used against certain broadleaf weeds. But that does not mean every product containing 2,4-D is suitable for every lawn. Bermuda grass, zoysia, St. Augustine grass, centipede grass, and cool season lawns can have different tolerances depending on the formulation and conditions. Read the label before you mix or spray anything. Check the recommended amount per gallon, the coverage per 1,000 square feet, temperature restrictions, required protective equipment, and instructions concerning children and pets. Never assume that doubling the concentration will give you twice the result. It may simply damage the lawn you are trying to protect. Killing existing spurge can clean up what you see today. But if thousands of seeds are already sitting in the soil, another generation may be waiting. That is why the next step, preventing germination, is where the long-term battle can finally begin to change. 7. The real breakthrough. Stop spurge before it germinates. This is the step that can finally break the cycle. If you only pull or spray the spurge you can see, you are dealing with the current generation. The seeds already sitting in the soil are still waiting for their chance. That is where a pre-emergent can help. A pre-emergent does not kill established spurge. Instead, it creates a barrier that interferes with the successful establishment of new weed seedlings before they become mature plants. Think of it this way. Pulling weeds is closing the door after they have already entered. Prevention is locking that door before they get inside. One active ingredient commonly used for this purpose is protiamine. where it is labeled and appropriate for your lawn or landscape bed. But timing matters more than simply choosing a date on the calendar. In the original example, the first application is made when soil temperatures reach roughly 55 degrees Fahrenheit. Usually around mid-February to early March in Zone 8A in North Alabama. Your timing may be different. If you live farther north, the soil may reach that temperature later. In warmer climates, it may happen earlier. So instead of guessing, check local extension recommendations, use an online soil temperature resource, or measure the soil yourself with a simple thermometer inserted about 2 inches deep. For many homeowners, even an old meat thermometer can be enough to monitor the trend. Some gardeners also use what is called a split application, where the product label allows it. Part of the recommended seasonal amount is applied around the first suitable soil temperature window, followed by the remaining portion several weeks later. The original method uses a second application about 6 weeks after the first. The purpose is to extend the period of prevention rather than relying on one application to cover the entire season. But there is one important detail. Pre-emergence cannot tell the difference between a weed seed you dislike and every desirable seed you want to grow. If you are planning to seed a lawn, sow flowers, or establish plants from seed, check the product label carefully and coordinate the timing. Otherwise, you may prevent the very seeds you wanted to germinate. Used correctly, pre-emergence changes the strategy completely. You are no longer waiting for hundreds of tiny weeds to appear and then trying to remove them one by one. You are reducing the number that ever gets started. And now we can turn this entire approach into a simple 30-day routine that is much easier to manage. Part: the 30-day Spurge reset for busy homeowners. Now let us turn everything we have covered into a simple 30-day reset. The goal is not to spend an entire weekend fighting weeds. It is to make a few small improvements each week so the garden, patio, lawn, and pathways become easier to maintain. Week 1. Remove. Start by walking through the areas where spurge is most likely to appear. Check the lawn edges, flower beds, patio, driveway cracks, gravel paths, raised beds, and the spaces around your containers. Pull young plants before they mature. If spurge is growing in a hardscape crack, use the appropriate method we discussed earlier. If a plant already has flowers or seeds, place it directly into a bucket or garden waste bag, rather than leaving it on the ground. Do not try to finish the whole property in one day. Work for 10 or 15 minutes at a time. Week 2. Close the openings. Now look at the spaces the weeds were occupying. Add mulch to exposed areas in ornamental beds. Sweep soil and organic debris from patio joints and gravel. Clean the spaces beneath container stands. If paver joints have opened, refresh the appropriate joining material. If the lawn has thin or bare areas, make a note to repair them at the correct season for your grass type. The idea is simple. Reduce the number of places where another seed can easily establish. Week 3. Correct the conditions. Look at how you maintain the space. If the lawn is being cut too short, adjust the mowing height. If you are watering lightly every day, review whether deeper and less frequent watering would be better for your established turf and plants. Check compacted areas, dry edges near concrete, and neglected corners where grass or ornamentals are struggling. Move containers occasionally so you can inspect the hidden areas underneath them. Week 4. Prepare for the next generation. Finally, think ahead. Decide whether a labeled pre-emergent is appropriate for your property and your planting plans. Check your local soil temperature timing and mark the approximate application window on your calendar. Then continue with one short inspection each week. For older homeowners, renters, or anyone with limited time or hand strength, this routine is intentionally manageable. 15 minutes today is better than 3 exhausting hours next month. And for renters, the same system works with reversible solutions: hand tools, removable mulch, clean paver joints, tidy containers, and regular sweeping. After 30 days, the biggest change may not be what you have killed. It may be how many opportunities you have removed for Spurge to come back. Conclusion: remove, prevent, protect, enjoy. If there is one thing I want you to remember, it is this. Spurge keeps returning when we fight only the plant and ignore the conditions that allow the next generation to grow. So keep the strategy simple. Remove young plants before they produce seed. Avoid mowing or string trimming mature patches first. Pull carefully in flower beds, clean cracks and paver joints, cover exposed soil with mulch, and strengthen thin areas of lawn. Then think ahead. If a pre-emergent is appropriate for your lawn or garden, use it at the correct seasonal timing and always follow the label. The fewer seeds that successfully germinate, the less bending, pulling, spraying, and frustration you will face next year. And that is especially important if you are maintaining a small backyard, a narrow patio, a balcony garden, a few raised beds, or a modest lawn around your home. You do not need a shed full of expensive equipment. A pair of gloves, a simple hand tool, good mulch, cleaner hardscape joints, better watering habits, and 10 or 15 minutes of regular attention can make a surprisingly big difference. Your garden should be a place where you sit with a cup of coffee, arrange your favorite containers, enjoy your flowers, or spend time with family. Not a place where you spend every weekend pulling the same weed again and again. Now I would love to hear from you. Where does Spurge cause the biggest problem around your home? The lawn, flower beds, driveway cracks, gravel, or patio pavers? And if you have found a method that works well in your area, share it in the comments below. Your experience may help another gardener dealing with the same problem. If you enjoy practical, affordable ideas for making your home, patio, and garden easier to maintain and more beautiful, subscribe to Dream Room. And follow the channel for more simple solutions you can actually use. Thank you for watching, and I will see you in the next Dream Room video.